day one concept idea. And today we're going to be talking about tools for assessing environmental risk because I talked about the environmental risk yesterday. It just makes sense that today is good to be looking at what kind of tool are we talking about here. So what are we really seeing? And some of those tools will involve, I'm sure, tools that you heard about before. So we're talking about the environmental impact assessment (EIA). I'm sure you've seen it, especially if you're in the renewables energy industry, or maybe technology assessment, things like, for example, the GIS, the geographic, information system, but also AI, artificial intelligence. Everybody knows about it. These are example of tools, yeah, that you could be using for this industry in order for you to be able to assess your environmental risk. So when you look at, for example, the process of environmental risk, yeah, so that's environmental impact assessment, yeah. So that is the first tool that I want to potentially talk about, yeah. So they are very, very important, especially in renewables energy, utility scale project. It may not so be the case when you're doing smaller project, but when you do utility scale, especially when you're involving the national grid, you will have the authority in this country asking you to carry an environmental impact assessment, the EIA. That's what it stands for, right? Very, very relevant. If you don't have it, and that's one of the requirements that would allow you to have the PPA or the authorization to be able to sell the power to whoever is your customer. Very important. And when you look at these EIA, you want to look at the qualitative part of it, yeah, whereby there is a set of rules, but also requirement that you need to meet, as well as the quantitative techniques as well. For example, there's a certain amount of, I would say, tests that you need to carry out in order to demonstrate that what you've been doing makes sense. And if you don't do that, guess what? You may be struggling now for you to able to get the permit you need to carry out with your operation. But another thing that is also very important is the technical assessment, the technology assessment more specifically. We're talking about here things like the geographic information system. That's something also you've heard about, but also AI now is becoming a big tool. You can use that to make those risk assessment and to have more accurate, more efficient data and insights as well, allowing you to make the decision that you want to do. And having those tools is really, really important because you want to make sure that you don't just make a decision subjectively. You need to have facts and figures, possibly in order for you to support your decision. So having this kind of tool, which are also standard that everybody can rely upon, it is very, very relevant and it's something that we strongly would recommend. And I mentioned companies or industry where those tools are used, and I say renewables energy, yeah. So that is one of it. And even if you say to me you're operating in infrastructure in general, right? Oil and gas, you want to build a bridge. So this kind of massive project, you should expect to have a kind of EIA involved as well, technology assessment, because it usually has a big implication for depopulation, for the economy, but also for the global country or the global region where you are, right? So having a proper assessment of what you're doing is important. Also, there's a huge amount of money usually back in this kind of project. So they want to be sure that you know what you're doing. Yeah. And that is just normal and excellent. Yeah. So you can expect as well that some challenges arise when you're having those tools because guess what? When you're moving from one country to the other, you don't always have the same standard applied. There may be some differences whether you're conducting an EIA in Africa, in Europe, in Asia. You can see some differences as well, right? And also technology. So you may be in a place where, but also if you're moving from a technology, in solar, may not be exactly the same that you do in wind. And if you are an operator operating multiple technology, multiple, I would say, geos, multiple technologies. So, it could be different. It may not be exactly the same. So you may have to reconcile both, right? So these are the kind of information that you want to take into account. Hopefully give you an idea of the kind of tool that we're looking at here. So I've talked about the EIA, I've talked about GIS, I've talked about artificial intelligence. These are the kind of tool you could be using for you to be able to assess your environmental risk. I'm sure there's many more, but here it's just the opportunity for me to introduce some of them to you to see how you can take that forward. Hopefully that's great, and I'll see you tomorrow. Let me know what you think about this video. Drop that in the comment box, and I'll be delighted to read for you. Thank you. Bye bye.